Welcome to the Anchored Podcast. Have you ever wondered how to stay grounded in your faith amid heartache, confusion, and a seemingly mass exodus of people leaving the faith? My name is Roseanne Dawes.
And I'm Stephanie Frankham. And we've discovered that being anchored in Jesus Christ is the key to navigating these rough waters. Join us as we explore how their faith and covenants have helped each of our guests navigate the storms of life.
Hello, and welcome to the Anchored Podcast.
We are so excited to introduce our guest to you today, Jayden Cornett.
And we had the privilege of interviewing a friend of his a few weeks ago, and it was a recommendation of Tom, a mutual friend to Jayden, who just said, "Hey, I think you'd really love to have him on the podcast." So we love it when our audience says, "Hey, here's someone." Just this week, we got a text from a friend saying, "Hey, what about this person and this person?" We're like, "Yes, we love the suggestions." So we're just going to put that out there. So we're just grateful that Tom mentioned you, Jayden. We're excited to get to know you a little bit more. I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and put yourself in context with our audience.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Like you said, my name is Jayden Cornett. I live up in North Idaho. I've moved around a little. I grew up in Tri-Cities, Washington. I've moved around the Northwest. I've lived in Oregon. I've lived in Washington, Idaho. I did live in Utah for a little bit. So moved around. I do a lot of different things, but primarily I'm an actor. I'm a musician. Um, I got a couple of day jobs. I'm teaching at a private school for kids doing like acting and stuff. And then I work at a physical therapy clinic. I do some freelance video production. I'm really busy and
Bit of everything.
yeah.
So awesome. So were you raised in the church? Give us a little bit of context there.
Yes, I was born and raised in the church. Yeah, growing up very active in the church. That's how we knew Tom. My dad was his home teacher. Um, and I grew up very, like I said, very active, very immersed in it. I grew up with a strong love of the gospel, a love of the scriptures. You know, my dad would sit at the dinner table with us every night, and we'd have these discussions, and oftentimes they would tie back into things in the scripture. So I learned at a very young age to have an appreciation for scripture, to learn how to read it and read for understanding. So yeah, grew up with a very strong foundation in the gospel and the church, and a love for all of that.
Awesome. Well, if you want to just jump into your story, you can just start wherever you like.
Okay. Um, yeah, let's see. So yeah, like I said, I grew up strong in the church. I served a mission. I went to Armenia, uh, kind of where Eastern Europe meets the Middle East.
That's a tough language. We
Oh
just
yeah,
a kid in our ward he did amazing, but man, that's a hard one.
it
Wow.
is. It's a whole new alphabet, and but it was amazing. I loved being in Armenia. I loved the people. I loved the language, and it was really, I mean, man, my mission was such an incredible experience. High highs, low lows, a lot of really happy, amazing spiritual times, a lot of uh, hard times, a lot of struggle, a lot of pain. So it was, I think, a good like microcosm of life. Um, so I got back. I finished my mission December 2015, and um, and then about 7 or 8 months later, I moved down to Utah. And the next few years would prove to be really, really challenging for me. I struggled a lot after I moved to Utah. I don't want to spend too much time in this part of the story, but just to give kind of like a foundation understanding of where I was coming from. I struggled a lot with my mental health, a lot of depression during that time. which I had experienced earlier in my life too, but never so intense and so like at the forefront of my consciousness as it was at that time. Um, and so I was really, really struggling. And I also dealt with a lot of OCD. Don't want to get too much into how that affected me, but just, it affects a lot of your thoughts and feelings. And we're taught that the way the Lord communicates to us through the Spirit is through our mind and our heart, right? Well, I felt like I couldn't trust my mind or my heart. And so it kind of going through this like uncertainty with literally everything in my life, and all these things have been such foundational things in my life, and then at the same time feeling depressed and alone. I felt completely derailed spiritually. um, I didn't know anything anymore, right? I had a very strong, solid testimony for the first 20 years of my life. And then all of a sudden, um, I don't know anything and I'm questioning everything. And I feel completely alone in it. I'm crying out, praying for, got to a point I wasn't even praying for relief. I wasn't even praying for that. I just wanted to know that like somebody was on the other end of the line. It's like, I don't care if you answer me, just let me know you're there at least, right? And so by 2019, I had been struggling a lot with this. And it was in 2019 that I first moved up here to North Idaho, looking for a fresh start. I had dropped out of college. I was at BYU for like a semester and a half. Just didn't feel right, and I left and I moved to the Oregon coast, and I was doing a bunch of different things. Honestly, had some amazing experiences. Um, but I was looking for a fresh start. Moved up here to North Idaho in 2019, and I was not emotionally, mentally, spiritually in a good place at that time. It's part of why I was looking for the change, right? But I was, um, again, very, very lost and depressed and trying to find something. I was kind of in this cycle of like some bad habits. I was struggling with even self harm at that time, which is something I didn't want to talk about a lot because I'm a grown man, you know. Um, but yeah, that was going on quite a lot. Had a lot of suicidal thoughts at that time. So kind of in this phase of um, vulnerability and instability, I met a girl um, who I started dating, and she was not kind of my typical type, and I know a lot of my friends and family were kind of confused, like why her. But I felt like she would understand me and understand my struggles and kind of that darkness that I was battling. And I was right about that. Um, but she had a lot of her own struggles, traumatic upbringing, that led to uh, a heroin addiction, um, which she had told me she was in recovery from. I don't know. Um, but we started dating, and it wasn't a healthy thing for me. Um, it wasn't a healthy relationship, I think, for either of us. I don't think we were in a place to have a healthy relationship. And so there was kind of this downward spiral, um, for me and my mental health. Um, I remember November 2019, and I was so, at this point, I felt so abandoned by God, because I was going to church every week, and I was trying to read my scripture. I was praying, and I was reaching out, like, help me. I have this darkness inside of me, and I need some light. I need you. And I felt like I was not getting anything back. And so I got cynical, I got angry, and it was like, all right, fine, fine. You don't want to talk to me, then I don't want to talk to you either. And I remember late November, like I said, 2019, it got to be too much. I was suicidal, didn't want to be around anymore. And I ended up in the hospital for about 5 days. Um, and that was rough. That was rough on me. That was rough on my family. Um, and after that, I mean, I felt terrible about, I felt guilty for what I put my loved ones through with that, and then felt like a coward, felt weak, And I got out on Thanksgiving Day, got out of the hospital on Thanksgiving Day, and I remember just being there with family, and feeling so disconnected, so dissociated, and like this, like, empty shell, right? And I carried on like that for another month, um, still dating this girl, but knowing, like, this is not good. This is not healthy. She's got a lot of issues, and I've got a lot of issues, and it's just not, we're feeding into each other. Um, and, and I knew I needed to leave that situation. And she knew that I was thinking that way, even though I didn't say it. I knew that she was catching on. Um, and she had a hard time with abandonment, right? So, like a month after my suicide attempt, it was my birthday. Or it was a couple days after my birthday, 2 days before Christmas. And I'll try and make this part of the story short, but I had some suspicions about some things with her, like maybe I wasn't the only guy in her life, and I was right. I couldn't sleep one night, and in the morning, like early in the morning, I just decided, okay, I need to go. I'd connected some dots, and I need to go talk to her about it. And I get to her place, and there's somebody else's car in the driveway. Um, and, you know, long story short, I walk in the house, and I find the two of them together in her bed. And what was so hard, I mean, that's hard for anyone, but I had always been so very guarded. Um, and she was the first person I had really been vulnerable with in every way. I mean, she'd seen me at in my darkest moments, in my most vulnerable, and in a state that no one else in my life had. And so, like, I had been so guarded so that wouldn't happen, and now it's like happening. And I was in such a fragile state after, you know, what had happened just a month earlier. Well, she starts, like, you know, trying to manipulate the situation, and saying she's going to relapse now, or she's going to commit suicide. She starts cutting herself and all this, and I was, what's going on? And I broke down, like, I felt, just, well, I don't want to, there's certain experiences that are very sacred, and I don't want to go too into detail, but after that happened with her, I had an experience where for the first time in a very long time, I actually did feel a connection to God, like kind of carrying me through this moment. And I was so overwhelmed and grateful for that. Also, so very broken and hurt and lost, and not knowing that things were about to get even crazier and a lot harder. Um, she went to work, and I knew that if I stayed, this would just blow over. And so she went to work. I went back to my place and I packed up all my stuff. I called my parents down in Oregon and said, "Hey, I am coming home." And I knew like I needed to get away and I needed to do it now, right? So I went back to her place that night just to say goodbye. Say, "Hey, I wish you the best, but I have to go." Um, she answers the door. She has a black eye, a split lip, and a cut from a knife across her face. I'm like, "What? What happened?" And she tells me that she was mugged by her old drug dealer on her walk home from work that night. And it's like, that's terrible. I'm still leaving. Like, I have to go, right? And I thought after that, like, I felt like maybe it was possible that she had done that to herself as a way to keep me, keep me from leaving, because I had sensed that she knew I was wanting to leave, So there's just some things it felt like, I feel like maybe this was a last ditch effort to keep me from leaving. And, and so I did, I left, and I spent Christmas with my family, still just so broken, empty shell. I had lost, by the way, like 20 or 30 pounds. I was down to 140 pounds. I'm 6 feet tall. Um, ribs sticking out and everything. And my parents, when they saw me, they're like, this is not okay. Like, so Christmas passes. 2 days later, I find out through a mutual friend that somebody had seen her face and called the cops, not wanting to get herself in any trouble. She kind of panicked, and she told them that it was me. And I don't think she realized, based on what I read from reports and everything, I don't think she realized how seriously they were going to take it. Um, there was a warrant out for my arrest, and it looked really bad because I had left the state. And so, sure enough, New Year's Eve, I wake up in the morning to two cops in my bedroom. They're at my parents' place in Oregon. And they're like, "Wake up, put some clothes on, we're taking you in." I'm walked out in handcuffs. My mom is sobbing. Walked out in front of all my neighbors there, and um, yeah, so they take me into the county jail there in Southern Oregon, and I was like, I just couldn't believe I was there. You know, I was very like straight edge, good kid growing up. I'd never gotten any trouble. Was never grounded even. Like just like as an Eagle Scout missionary. Like this just doesn't make sense. Like why am I here? And how did I get here? Right. And obviously like blaming myself for a lot of things. Like, well, if I wouldn't have made all these choices, which is true, I made a series of choices that led to that, but there was also a lot of unfair things and it happened. And so I was just hoping like, okay, they'll take me up to Idaho and we'll get this sorted out. I sat in jail in Oregon for 2 weeks before they began the extradition. Um, just waiting, 2 weeks of waiting there, scared, alone, and really, really depressed. And I remember um, my mom coming to visit me while I was there, And she took one look in my eyes and just started crying because she could see where I was at. And she's like, "Don't you dare quit. Don't you give up." Um, and it was really hard. Um, and here I am, completely powerless. My life is not in my hands. And now I have to trust that everything's going to be okay, when for the last how many years, like, I haven't felt any connection to God. I haven't felt like God cared. If he didn't care then, why would he care now, right? And I'm immersing myself, like, I got a Bible and I was reading every day, just like trying everything I could to connect, to have some sort of hope, trying desperately to not give up. And it was a fight every single day. 2 weeks I was there in Oregon. Finally, they transport me. Transport was 3.5 days. You're on the chain gang, going county to county. So staying a night in a different jail each night, and until I finally got to Kootenai County Jail up here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. By the way, crazy stories from every one of those stops along the way. Um, I've got some funny stories, some fun stories, and some scary stories. Yeah, it's a wild experience. Once I got up here to Coeur d'Alene, it was another 2 weeks in jail before I had my pretrial hearing, where they decide if they have enough to take it to trial, right? So, and I find out finally, what I'm being charged with. I was like a high security prisoner because it was a violent crime. Excuse me.
So let me just clarify. You didn't know this whole time why you were in jail?
I mean, I knew it, like, the incident, but they didn't give me my official charges until I got to Kootenai
Okay.
County, where the charges were being taken place. Right. I just knew I was being held because I was going to be taken and charged up in Kootenai County,
Okay.
but I didn't know any of the specifics, like, and so I find out then it's like, okay, so it's felony aggravated battery, which in Idaho had up to a sentence of up to 15 years. And then if I didn't plead guilty, they were going to tack on another 15 years for a deadly weapon enhancement. I'm like, you guys don't even know, like, this is not what happened.
Mhm.
And nobody ever asked me my side of things except my attorney, which was public defender, which was also scary. um, so I just felt completely powerless. Like, I didn't even have a voice. Like, I didn't even have a chance to defend myself, and I wasn't going to until trial. And my attorney was telling me, like, this will probably go to trial. Nobody gets out at their hearing. Like, not nobody, but it's very unlikely. And a speedy trial was within 6 months. So I'm like, I could be here. I've already been here a month. You're telling me I could be here another like 5 or 6 months before I even get a chance to say my side of things. And as soon as I do, this will clear this up, right? um, so I go into my hearing, and long story short, she changed her story just enough to get me out. Told enough of the truth to have the case dismissed, have the charges dropped against me, clear my name, but enough lies to still not get herself in trouble, right? And yeah, so I mean, what a relief and a release that was. And that night, I was let out. Um, my my brother picked me up, took me out to dinner, and then the next day, I flew back down to Oregon and tried to start over.
So
Right,
Jayden, so when you were finally able to do it, then how long had you been in jail by the time you finally were able to go in?
32 days.
32 days. Okay.
32
But you
days
didn't have to do
facing
the 6 months. Okay.
No, it was 32 days facing up to 30 years for something I didn't do. Right, and yeah, and what a relief, right? And a lot of gratitude, a lot of prayers answered. And yeah, but then I come home, and I remember walking into my room after getting home from the airport that night, walking into my room, closing the door, and falling to the ground and sobbing. Um, and kind of this feeling of like, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? Like a month or two later, COVID hit, and we were all locked down. So we're like quarantined, and now I'm like, I just went from one to the other, you know. um, and and so there's a lot of struggle. I went through a lot of anger, a lot of hate, a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. I just a lot of very strong emotions. Um, Getting back into therapy, trying to figure out like how do I recover from all of this? Like because before that happened, I was just in the hospital because I didn't want to live. Like I'm still dealing from still like reeling from that. How do I not go back to that place, you know? And I worked really hard that year to get in a good place, to not let these things keep me down, to rise up and in spite of all of that to take back control of my life, right? And I got in a really, really good place. And exactly a year after my time in jail, um, we got a call one night saying that one of my brothers had committed suicide. And it broke us, all of us in the family. Um, and, you know, everyone in my family struggled with it. Speaking just to myself personally, like it just took me right back to a lot of old feelings and things. And it's like I'd worked so hard. And then, a few months later, I found myself in the hospital again, um, self-admitted to the behavioral health, mental health hospital, because I saw myself going down an old road again. When I got out, I lost my job because I'd been gone for a week, and just all these things. And so I ended up going back down to Oregon again. Where do I start? Like, where do I go from here? I was just broken, and it was like every little bit of traction I had got to try and pull myself back up ripped out from under me again. Um, and I I didn't know what to do with my life at this point, and I felt pretty fragile, pretty broken about being at this point in my life and feeling like I had nothing to show for it. Um, I knew in that time I wasn't working a whole lot, just enough to get by, just kind of in this like I just need to heal and take it a day at a time. Um, and I had been involved with the community theater down there in Oregon. Um, Long story short, that led to me getting involved with a local or with an independent film that was being shot down there. And I had always known that I wanted to do that, but it never um, was something I allowed myself to think about it because it's just too unreasonable, unrealistic, right? Get your head out of the clouds, kid. But at this point, I was, I don't know, 26, 27, I think, and I'm like, I got nothing left, like nothing left to lose. So yeah, and I got this part in this movie, and it was amazing. First day I walked on set, I knew this is where I belong. Um, and I ended up moving back up here, and things have just really moved me in that direction. acting a lot, even up here in North Idaho, Spokane area, like, and I'm finally feeling like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing in my life. Um,
I'm
using the
curious,
gifts.
Jayden. Do you see the Lord's hand in all of that? Like,
Yeah,
yeah. What
yeah,
does that look like? But just recognizing that all of this chaos, all of this struggle, all of this craziness, right? This low of low, and yet God is still leading you and guiding you into what you're meant to be doing anyway. What does that
and
look like?
you know, there have been moments along the way where it's like something would hit me, you know, um, while I was in jail, after I got out of jail, dealing with my brother's death, like all these things. There would be there was a lot of struggle, a lot of trying to make sense of it all, and then I'd have a moment where it's like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense, and it gets me through the next phase of like, but okay, that makes sense, but now I'm still mad, or what, um, or it's like, well, that was nice to feel God in my life for like an hour, and now I'm back to fighting through this again, So, but as these things kind of add up here and there over time, it's like, okay, maybe I want to be angry. Maybe it's easier to shift all the accountability onto God and say it's His fault for abandoning me. Um, it's easier to do that, and I did that a lot. Um, to be fair, I think He does leave us alone at times, and I think there's a reason for it. Um, doesn't mean it doesn't suck. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, right? Um, but to see in retrospect, like I couldn't deny, and it would be wrong and absolutely ungrateful of me to deny like the divine hand in all of it. Now, I asked myself like, okay, well, was that part of the plan? Like, did God set this in motion? Did He put me in jail, or did He just allow it to happen? Right. Either way, it doesn't matter so much because it's what He does with it, right? And I think what I would have to say is my favorite scripture is in Isaiah. It's my favorite scripture, and I can never remember the exact reference. Um, but it's where He says, "I will give unto them beauty for ashes." And I think if there's been a theme that I've seen recurring in my life, that's what it is. Something awful, something terrible, something tragic, something just unthinkable happens, and then just watch what He does with it, right? Um, even going back to the beginning of the story where I felt like my foundation was being ripped out from underneath me. I can't trust my thoughts and my feelings anymore. The testimony that I had just felt so unstable, felt like it was gone. Um, well, what's the beauty that came from that? I chose to never stop going to church, even when I didn't necessarily believe it, even when I didn't want to be there, even when I was so fed up with the culture that I saw. Even when people would say things that it's like, I just don't think that's true. It's or maybe you're talking about how wonderful it was that God helped you find your keys and how that like built your testimony. It's like, well, guess what? I lost my keys too, and He didn't say anything, you know? Like, but I kept going in spite of all that anger because I knew I wanted the connection, and I hoped it would come back someday. Well, having my testimony stripped down to its bare bones, its core. Um, when I was young, honestly, it came easy. Like I never doubted anything. It's just like, yeah, it's true. Everything that I know or believe now, I've fought for. Um, and I have the blood, sweat, and tears to back it up. So maybe I don't know everything that I want to know, or maybe I don't know everything that I felt I knew earlier in my life. But what I do know, I've earned, and it means a heck of a lot more. Um, and so when I look at you and I say, I know this, like, I mean it, and there's more weight to it.
So Jayden, what do you know? Can you share that with us?
Yeah. Um, I know we're not on our own. I, I and I know everything's going to be okay. I know, um, I know there is not just a higher power, but a higher power that is connected to us through the deepest, purest, most all-encompassing love that I've ever experienced. And I don't feel that love constantly, but I feel it in moments sparingly. I think it's important to understand that that's how it is in life. Uh, but when I've had those moments where I have come into contact with that divinity, that God, I just know like it's all going to work out. And um, and so I don't need to worry about the details, right? I don't need to know everything. Um, because I know it's all gonna come together, right? Because I've seen it all come together, and it's still in the process. When I was in jail, family members who had been estranged came together, rallying together. My uncle, who hadn't really felt any connection to God for a long time, was praying every day for me with belief, with faith. Family members who hadn't really talked, overlooked differences to come together through this, right? Um, so yeah, and then just the things in my own life, like the pain, the struggle, and the wandering, leading me to finding who I really am and what I'm really meant to be doing, and then finding myself closer to God through that process of embracing the gifts that He's given me and fully trusting Him to make it work out. you know um, I cannot deny the miracles that I've seen throughout, all those things happening at the same time. Miracles are happening. Let me share something with you. At the same time I'm in jail having a crisis of faith, feeling like God has abandoned me, I have a cellmate who comes to me fearing for his soul, asking me, like, do you really think we can be forgiven? And all my doubts just like vanishing in that moment and being replaced by this testimony that I got to share with him. Yeah, I don't care. Maybe you still have to pay like maybe you still have to pay a sentence in the eyes of the law, and that's okay. Do that. That's good. But you can be forgiven tonight in this jail cell. Like, you can be right with God right now, you know, and being able to testify of that to him, and know it. And it was just amazing how, like, the two could happen in the same night, you know. Um, and life is just so beautifully complex and nuanced like that. And I think when we get too, this is something I guess I've learned from, when we get too lost in the dark or the ugly or the pain, um, we lose sight of how beautiful the interplay between the two is, right? Um, and that can go the other way. I think the beauty of life is found in the way, like, good and evil play with each other, and the way light and dark, like, it's in that interaction, right? The peace and the chaos, like, we get too lost in the chaos, and it brings us down, and we get cynical and we get depressed. If we try and pretend none of that exists and try to only see, like, all the happy and the fun and the lighthearted, like, we're missing half of the picture. And it's when the two come together that we really see, like, the magnitude of the glory of God. There is no triumph without struggle, right? What is the resurrection without the crucifixion? And so I think the peace that I've come to have in my life, and the lessons I've learned, it's looking back at all these experiences in life, and seeing, like, I wouldn't change anything that happened, because it would take away from the miracles that I've experienced as a result, and it would take away from who I've become as a result. Um, so
And understanding that your soul is, whatever this life is, your soul is wanting to play this out so that you can become acquainted with God. That's what you've experienced through all of this, is just coming to know who he is, but your soul needed it on whatever level this is, for
yeah,
you to just not only appreciate it and be grateful for it, but testify of it. There is such a power when you say, I know this because of the opposite.
right.
That's what this life is about. This is fallen world is joy and sorrow. And it is that dance between the two and appreciating both, because you become acquainted with God and you get to experience the atonement of Jesus Christ in your life, whatever through all of that joy and sorrow is. That is absolutely beautiful and powerful. And my soul has been lifted because of your testimony. So I appreciate that. So, with all of this being said, Jayden, well, before we ask the final question, I do want to ask, because you're not alone with people who seek and not find, and maybe they'll get these little glimpses, what kind of advice can you give them to help them through that when they're not getting everything that they think they desire?
Um, don't give up.
Just like your mom, don't you dare give up.
Exactly. Um, I think. Can I read you something that I wrote in a journal?
Please do.
Um, because I think this is just the best way I can put it. Um, this was a couple days after I got out of jail. As I've pondered the story of Jesus asleep on the boat with his disciples while a terrible storm was raging, and how this story correlates with experiences in my own life, I've come to a realization. They were scared because Jesus was sleeping and not helping them, or they thought he was sleeping. But they should have taken comfort from the fact that he was confident enough to rest. He was clearly not worried. Often we let perceived silence in response to our pleadings cause us to panic. But apparent silence and inaction from God should give us comfort and courage because it shows us that he is not worried as we are. If he appears to be sleeping, then our ship is not sinking. Our situation is not as bad as it seems. If it were, and we were truly helpless, he would respond to our prayers of faith and intervene. In all his miracles, the Lord helps those who cannot help themselves. And you could come back and say, well, look at people who have prayed for relief from things and it didn't happen. They died in whatever it was, right? Um, all we have is all we know is this limited mortal life. And I think the only way to have peace is to recognize that there's more. There's more than this. And so the answers that we don't get, if we really needed it right now, we would have it. If we don't get it in this life, we didn't need it in this life, right? Um, and I've been able to come to this place of like, I don't need all the answers yet. It's frustrating and it's annoying and it causes sleepless nights still. But I can always come back to this place of, but God said it was going to be okay. Not just in the scriptures, but to me, like and I'm fortunate and blessed to have had that, and I fought to get there for years, and um, and I know people have struggled their whole lives and still have this that don't have that certainty, and I wish I could make it happen, but I just it's in as cliche as it is, it's God's timing. Um, so what do we do in the meantime? Like I said, don't give up. And two, busy yourself instead with how you can serve others. Because I think when I have gotten too caught up in like trying to figure out everything, well, is this true or is this like, what does this mean or all that? Like, I need this answer. I need this answer. I need this answer. I just kind of spin myself out into more confusion and more frustration. And I remember coming to a realization at one point. It's like, okay, there's a lot of things I don't know, a lot of things I can't see. What I do know, what I can see is there are my brothers and sisters in front of me who need help, and I can help. So, and ultimately, like, what's the greatest commandment, right? I think that's I think that's what Christ emphasized because he knew we're not going to have all the answers. So focus on this because this is what you can do. This is what you can know. Help people, love people. Don't worry so much about yourself, right? Um, so
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. I feel so calmed that our listeners are going to be able to hear that. That is so huge. So you all the way along the way, you were still going to church. And so today, with your history behind you and so many challenges, why do you choose to stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
yeah, I will say, like throughout all this, like there has been a struggle. I never stopped going to church. Um, I may have stopped living gospel at times, and I know you both talk a lot about covenants and things, and to be completely honest, that's been a struggle for me. You get to a place where you feel like God isn't there, He doesn't care, and well, then why should I care, right? Um, and then you know, um, it's easy to kind of stray from some of those things, and then it's hard to change those things, right? It's like, well, why does this really matter if I do that or don't do this or whatever, right? Um, and so I believe in the power of making that kind of a pact or a covenant with God. I struggle. Um, I'm always afraid, honestly, to talk about, especially in the last few years, knowing some of the things in my life right now. Um, I'm sometimes afraid to talk about what I believe in because I don't want to be a hypocrite. And I don't want anyone to think like, oh, Jayden, he talks about all this stuff, but he doesn't live it. It's like, no, I'm a sinner. Um, but I haven't abandoned it in principle because I still believe it, you know. And I hope to uh, to have the strength and time to let go of things, to purge things from my heart, um, to have that change of heart, to be the devoted disciple that I was. I've also come to, um, you know, growing up, I did have a very like perfectionist mindset to where any sin just made me the worst soul alive. And so I think part of the beauty of this process too has been, yes, have I made mistakes? Have I sinned a lot and done a lot of things um, against what God asked us? It, it has kind of helped me shift my focus off of our actions and onto our hearts and the grace of Christ. Because as we know, it is by grace that we're saved. He still asks us to try and emulate him. Um, but ultimately it's he who saves us. And going through this process of like I was holding on to my own actions and my own works and my own obedience as, you know, this is proof that I am a good person. And I think I needed to go through a process of losing that to teach me that it really is not me, it's Christ. And instead, the more, and I have begun to experience this, that the more um, I recognize him and just appreciate that, the more I try to connect with that, then I feel the change of heart to where naturally I want to do those sinful things less, right? So I'm on that journey and I like that journey, you know. Have there been doubts specifically about this church? Yes, those have come up, but overwhelmingly, you know, I don't need to have all the answers, and I feel good here, and and I love the unique teaching of the plan of salvation of what continues after this life, who we were before this life, as the divine offspring of God, and that this life is part of this process that continues after this life of us becoming something more holy, something more like our Father, right? Um, it just, with what I've experienced in my life, it just makes so much sense in my soul. Um, and all the nuances of church culture and church history that people get hung up on, and I don't have all the answers, and some of it I don't like, or I did whatever. It's so, to me, and I understand how important, how big of a struggle that can be for people. For me, it's far more significant, the things I do know, the things I feel in my heart. And I just have found such meaning through this process. And I want to keep going on that process and see who I become as a result.
And that conviction is what we feel because of this story, because of the journey, because of the lows, and just what you've learned through that. That I feel that conviction. That's the power. And God is using you. So thank you so much for coming on our show today. And just what you've shown me is you might not think it's perfect, but it's totally perfect because you're willing. All the way through, you were just willing to go to church, willing to pray when you weren't getting answers, willing. That's all we can do, is just be willing. That's all he asks. And that is so profound and beautiful and exactly what my soul needed to hear today. Thank you so much, Jayden.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It reinforces some things for me and helps me. It gives me a reminder of what it's all about too. So
Thank you, Jayden.
We're all taught by the Spirit. I love it.
Yes, it has been wonderful to have you, and to our listeners, thank you so much for listening today. Thank you. If this beautiful, amazing story by Jayden touches your heart and you know of somebody that needs to hear his message, we would ask that you share. Will you like and subscribe and all of the things if you haven't, just so that we can get these messages further reach. And if you have a story, please reach out to us. You can find us at anchorpodcast.net and fill out the form, and we would love to have you on the program. Until next week, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you for being with us.